Hey there, welcome back to Beyond the Sequence. Sarah Amadon and Amanda Archibald are ready to give you some more DNA insights in our episode where we're going to be talking about breakdown and recovery in another session. I'll let Amanda explain what we're doing there. But before we do that, we like to do just a little icebreaker. So, where you been to lately, Amanda? What are you up to?
Well, we laughed because when you were busy being studious in New York recently, I was in the desert. I was in Palm Desert, SoCal, Southern California, with a friend who's an architect who lives there, and I was at Modernism Week.
What's that? And it was Palm Springs, right?
Palm Springs and Palm Desert. So this is the Coachella Valley. And so every year they celebrate mid-century modern, because that is like
Ooh.
the naissance of the architecture. That's where it really, really blossomed in the 50s. And so you can do these amazing tours, the older movie actors, you can't always go into their homes, but you can actually do these wonderful tours. And then some of the homes have been rehabbed and you can actually go in, and it is such a celebration of art and architecture from that era. So it's a beautiful place too. So that's what I was doing, hobnobbing about, enjoying the architecture I absolutely adore.
I've never been to Palm Springs before, so thanks for the recommendation.
Great hiking location. Oh my gosh, great outdoor
Ooh.
place. Yeah.
hmm I just got back from the Integrative Healthcare Symposium where we co-presented with Yale last year.
Good.
So just it feels like a family reunion, like, so many dietitians and other practitioners that we love. One of my favorite talks is probably Deanna Minnick. She just released a book about like eating the rainbow and like all the color that and the benefits from that. And she's a PhD, a nutritional researcher, an educator, and she's just so kind.
She
So I
is.
got to meet her for the first time. Yeah, saw Dr. Habib, who we've enjoyed his vagus nerve
Love
work.
him. Biggest fans. We're cheerleaders for that guy. Did he do another lecture?
He did do another lecture, and he's working on a new book where he's going to be talking about, like, I think he's calling it his Vegas protocol. But he was like, I want you to give me feedback, tell me what you think of this, and if you think this is a solid idea for a book, because like the acronym, I think Vegas,
I saw
and
that, yeah.
having, things to do and think about to, activate or calm your vagus nerve down with the parasympathetic nervous system. And so I was like, nope. I love it. I think it's so simple and really approachable for the general public to continue learning from him as they should. So yeah, and of course Dr. Bland was amazing, and I met Dr. Lowdog. Oh my gosh, her talk just about bridging the gap between
I saw that.
Western medicine, Eastern medicine. Just she has such wisdom, and she's an herbalist, and she obviously is an MD, and she's a midwife, and she just does so many amazing, amazing
And she
things.
has
So
the DNA literally in her soul. She's Native American. Is she Navajo? I'm
I'm
not
not altogether
sure,
sure.
but yes. And so that is in her soul. I mean, she carries
Hmm.
those messages like that are just instilled in her. And I actually saw that from her talk. And I forget, I think it was our friend Amy who's like, she said this, it blew her away, right? Like almost to tears. It was that soul reaching. So, yeah, and I was able to see what she was presenting on, and she's presented something similar, which I was able to get off of YouTube. I'm like, yeah. So anyone
Yeah.
low dog, literally. So yeah, she's Native American. Forgive
Yeah.
me
She's
for not
incredible.
knowing very specifically there.
Yeah. And I think just her thought process around health and wellness.
Hmm.
She said we don't want less rigor, in the science, but we also want to take the personalization, for every individual. So it's everything that we say about N of one. It's like we could do all the clinical
Yeah,
trials, all the randomized controlled research we want, but the reality is everyone's biochemistry and genes and the foundation are unique to them, and there's only so much we can do and see from group research versus the N of one. And so I
exactly.
think it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. And probably with her training, you think about Ayurvedic physicians who are Ayurvedic doctors, and their way of analyzing and listening to the body is so completely different from ours. Talk about N of one, or traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncturists, that they're able to feel and touch energy that we can only experience by moving, right? If we're doing things like Tai Chi or Qigong, but that is a whole other level, which like speaks to what she's talking about as well, N of one. But even how we're understanding N of one now, I think is different, right? We look at it through the lens of DNA and epigenetics, but yeah, I'm so respectful of all these other modalities.
Yeah, and we're really starting to see research come out in, the energy medicine department. Even if we consider it, you know, a, an effect that is, well, is it in your mind that is impacting you, or is it really impacting you in your biology? But the reality is, it doesn't really matter, if it's impacting your biology, even if it's a placebo effect, that's still a benefit, right? That's still
I
going to
think,
impact.
Sarah, where we're going to start to see that, because I'm speaking from experience now, is in epigenetics. Truly, like epigenetic testing, because you're going to be with me again this later on this year in Greece, where we are experiencing epigenetic testing, so true age and true health. And that's where you can really see the wear and tear of the environment we're living in on your body. And why am I going there? Because I'm thinking of some of the clients or patients that I'm seeing right now where their labs are great, but they're falling apart. And when and
Hmm.
this is more Shannon's Lemontier's work, when she starts to do some of the emotional pieces that she's so brilliant at, that this is not my space. We all have our brilliance. That is what changes. It's when we bring people back online emotionally, or through energetics, or through these touch therapies, or not even therapies, it's through work and like getting in touch with yourself. That's where I see the change. That's where people come back online. So when you talk about energy medicine, this is working with your energetics, but in a different way, your emotional energetics. And I always say, I think 80% of the work is not how brilliant we are in science. It's the people we work with, and you're also one of them who's very, very good working with people, emotionally. And it's not woo-woo emotional. It's like really understanding that what they're going through and how we have to deal with that first.
Yeah, I was coaching a mom of a 19-year-old who's trying to play college football, and the mom herself is, an entrepreneur and has her own business, and she's got two boys who are super athletic, and I just had to stop her and go, "You're doing great. Like you're trying to like be the glue and hold everything together when your kids and your, husband sound a little more neurodivergent." And
Yeah.
I recently, like, the Holderness family is a like kind of comedic family that has a lot of content on social media. They did The Amazing Race, but the husband Penn, they have a podcast too. The husband Penn has ADHD. Like, they made T-shirts that say ADHD is awesome. They wrote a book, and then recently Kim on her podcast said, like, "Oh my gosh, I think I have ADHD." She got diagnosed, and she's like, "I feel like a fraud this whole time."
Oh,
And it's just so crazy the ways, I think, especially as women, and especially as moms and even entrepreneurs, I'm like, is it that I have ADHD, or is it that I'm just like trying to do so
I
much?
tend to think the
And I don't,
latter. Yeah.
yeah, or both,
Or
like
both.
what's, if we took a few things off of my plate, and, I've told my husband this before, we just recently put a dry erase board in our kitchen on a door where it's, we have four quadrants. There's Greg, there's me, there's Zeke, there's Wesley, and that's like our chore and project list. And this morning Zeke's like, "I need new shoes." And I'm like, "Hey, put it on my board so I don't forget,"
Yeah.
that we can like write on each other's things
Oh,
and check
that's
things off
great.
or wipe them off. And like that has been so helpful for Greg, because he has, constant projects, but then he might forget about them if they're not just like right out there for him to see.
Exactly.
And so his brain, he's like, "I think I might have ADHD
This is
too." And I'm
great
like, "Is
too.
it?" And yeah, I mean, we know Wesley was diagnosed with that. But the ways in which we can support our brains just being so full of things to
Hmm.
do, and, information, and
Oh,
helping
yeah.
our families to thrive, especially
Hmm.
as moms, there's just the list is endless, and that part gets a little overwhelming. So
I
I think
I think it is.
supporting each other in that.
That's interesting. So, like, we have four ADHDers now. This is perfect in your house. So we can see you coming. They're the ones where everyone's falling out of chairs. No. But you know what? I mean, I see this all the time in practice. But to me, ADHD, number one, I think 100% of people, individuals, well, the age are, who quote have this diagnosis with ADHD are brilliant. And number two, from a biochemical perspective, it's just a case of re-steering the molecules. Whether, you need more help keeping dopamine in the synaptic gap, or whether there's some cofactors missing, or whether we need to detoxify. It's genetics, right? And it just shows up in different ways with individuals. So I find it amazing. It's almost less common a diagnosis, and a diagnosis I use like, oh my gosh, in parentheses, it's almost as common a diagnosis as hypothyroidism. It just says something's off in the biochemistry, and we just kind of re-steer things and, put give the genes some love through the right nutrients. But I do think purely epigenetics, right? The speed of our environment and the ideas. I was talking to my good friend Joanne Lipinski in Australia yesterday. She was funny. Joanne, sorry, I'm going to talk about you, but she said, "Well, I have to redo my website. My population are millennials." I said, "Well, that's definitely not my population." But she said, "You have to understand." She said her guy she hired to help her with her website said they only have 7-second attention span. So I had to, she said, "Why is my traffic dropping off?" He said, "Because if you've only got 7 seconds, nobody's going to read through a landing page that asks questions. You got to know who you are and what you do." And it just made me laugh that we can't even stay focused long enough to read something. That's how, but I think that's an excuse. I just think it's a sheer demand and amount of information that we're processing on
Yeah, and
minds.
the methylation piece really plugs in there, and that's something we're going to support for this 19-year-old athlete. Is they started a methylated B complex after seeing his gene results, but then we're like, let's have a practitioner take a look at it too. But even her husband was like, "I'm noticing a difference in his ability to focus and the motivation piece," and so the stress really strains
It
methylation in
does.
such a big way. And when we've got so many balls that we're juggling all at the same time, like, we have to consider the impact on methylation. Go back and listen to the methylation episode, the folate episode. It's so crucial, and I feel like everyone is straining methylation right now, whether you've got SNPs in it or not. And it really does need that support with your B vitamins and, supporting the mitochondria. And then we might have breakdown of our bodies, downstream, which are things we're going to chat about later today. So
That was a
yeah,
long
I
intro.
know it was a long
Hey, what have you
intro.
been up to? Well, there you go. As you know, we sort of have a script here, but we're talking about what we see in practice. So, and that's what's different about a podcast. That we are looking beyond the sequence, and we're looking under the hoods of topics and health issues and how they show up in our practice. So, on that note, when we began, this is 2026 this year, we said we're going to break the year up into, we can compartmentalize the year. In the first 3-4 months or episodes, we're looking at breakdown and recovery, and we've talked a lot about how that's showing up in individuals we're working with, and particularly with athletes that you're working with. So what we're going to talk about today is how that may show up in midlife, which is such a topic, and I think this is going to be fascinating for you. So our title is, "It's Not Age, It's Adaptation, Why Midlife Bodies Suddenly Hurt Differently." Why is it, and what on earth are we talking about there? Why is it that you do notice you suddenly cross this threshold and you say, "It's just taking me longer to recover," right? Whatever it is, a bruise or a cut or whatever, and you do notice that. But suddenly you realize, my hips are a little bit more achy, or it just takes me longer to warm up. Oh, it's age. And the question is it really? And what's underneath the hood? So that's what we're going to get into. So I'm just going to sort of give a little bit of an opener here and then talk about how we're going to go through this conversation, and we're going to jump in, Sarah. It's a big topic. I don't think this is going to be an hour long. It might be longer. You never know.
We like to chit chat, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, we like to chit chat, but that's all good, right? You can just stop and start. So the bottom line is, like I said, that a lot of people enter midlife and suddenly they feel like their body has changed. So what's midlife? Over 40, it could be over 35 with some people. Some people say, oh, it's 50. But in other words, there's this transitional period, often accompanied by hormone shifts in both men and women, or women and men. So things that show up, or you can think about for yourself, is I didn't change anything, but now everything hurts. Recovery takes so much longer. I feel stiffer than I used to, right? And the default explanation, you're just aging, put up with it. You know what you expect. You're 45, you're 62, you're 78. These things come with aging. And that's it. It's like, okay, well, I'm getting older, so I'll just deal with it. I'll slow down. But midlife is when a lot of things are shifting, like sex hormones, big discussion today, connective tissue repair. I wonder if they're connected. Circulation, mitochondrial energy. Well, if those of you have no idea what we're talking about, we'll go deep there. And then, of course, the nervous system, which that's infiltrated or wound through all of it. And then I think also, like we were just talking about, stress. Stress hits us in different ways in midlife because we may be dealing with, like you're dealing with really assertive kids, that academically they're really invested in a number of things, or they're invested in sport. You're being pulled in 20 different ways. You've got activities inside of school, outside of school, or conversely, you may be starting to deal with parents who are just getting a little bit older, and they may only be in their 60s, but stuff is changing, or grandparents, So when you're in your 40s and 50s, you kind of stretch to the earlier decades of life, your kids, right? And then the later decades, your family members. So you're stretched, and so stress can hit us pretty hard there. So we're going to talk about all of these things. We'll be curious what your observations are as you're listening in, whether light bulbs go on there. So, Sarah, we're going to remind our audience that the way we're going to divide our conversation up, this is our little four pointers we cover. What are we seeing? Why is it happening? That's the science. Patterns that we recognize. When we say patterns, it's like, are we seeing consistent patterns like in genetics, in labs, in symptoms, and how that connects to the individuals we're seeing? And how we guide, what are we doing? So those are the 4 topics. So let's jump in, Sarah. Let's jump in with what are we seeing? What are the common complaints, things that your clients are saying to you when they show up and they're midlifers, whatever that age is. Let's say it's 40 and over. What are you seeing? What are the patterns?
Yeah, and I just turned 42 on March 7th, so I'm in my 40s now. I'm not just 40, but I'm experiencing those things myself, and I know I added in the notes like just being pulled, generationally between like your kids having needs and now your parents also having needs, but also the worry that comes along with changes in their health too. But in my clientele or in people in my age group and me personally experiencing some additional like soreness, stiffness, things that are lasting a little longer than I would like them to. I don't feel like I can get away with playing volleyball to the level and the degree and to the same intensity that I once did, where in my 20s and 30s, I would go for every ball. And now I have to calculate, like, do I really want to go for that ball, or do I want to save up my energy for the next play? Like the likelihood of that being a successful, rally goes down. But also women who may have like increased migraines, their obviously hormones are changing, and they're having challenges coming out of the ways that hormone replacement therapy was just very, I don't want to say woo woo, but just very shunned, by the medical community for such a long time. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but we're finally coming back to, hey, we can utilize this for some people, and trying to get away from the mindset of that's a really bad thing. But even like we're having more weight gain, we're struggling with weight loss and holding on to our muscle. and the stress resiliency has tanked completely. Not uncommon in our culture right now with the way like politics have been and environmental changes and you know even loss of certain support systems within our community and those sorts of things. Like even health insurance is a really stressful thing for a lot of people, because we don't have that universal health care. So many things that end up showing up as the body is breaking down in our 40s and our enzymes are slowing down. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we think about why are our bodies breaking down? Like, but we take athletics out of it, because that's a completely different topic. So it's like demand on steroids on our body. I mean, it literally is. Everything's speeded up. Demand is super high. But why in midlife are our bodies breaking down? Are there, in your opinion, there specific like biochemical anchors or things that are flipping and changing? They are, right? But what if there's like two or three things you're seeing, like not in genetic patterns, but we've talked about what people are complaining about, but are you seeing, or complaints meaning why they're coming to us, not complaining, but what is causing that breakdown? What are you seeing, like in labs
I
or anything
mean,
like that?
going back to the introduction where, women are doing so much, maybe too much, both with domestic responsibilities and work as well, but it's coming out in, oh, I just feel crazy
Hmm.
and I can't focus and, I can't lose this weight and, the over exercising, under fueling, the calories in, calories out. So women in particular are definitely having those challenges, and we might see their cortisol is just, through the roof, really.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah. Labs can show up in various ways with, maybe they're having some glucose and insulin signaling challenges. Cholesterol might be going up. They might have some increased, C-reactive protein, inflammatory markers. And some of their nutrients might be depleted, but sometimes it's just really challenging to measure nutrient metabolism and absorption in some of those blood levels, because what's really getting into the cell. So that's where I think dietitians are some of the best equipped in the nutrition science and nutrition therapy and counseling, because we can spot nutrition deficiencies just from interviewing a client before lab work, or even if lab work it just isn't reflecting that, but we're seeing it in what they're sharing, like a vitamin A deficiency. I feel like in my dietetics program for so long, it's like, you don't want too much vitamin A, that's bad, you can't overdose on vitamin A. But we've stopped eating organ meats, and I'm not seeing a lot of, active vitamin A being consumed in most diets. And I think most people are actively deficient in
That's an
vitamin A, which
interesting
goes
point.
into hormone production, reproduction, skin and hair and eyes. And we're missing that, big time. But we're still so afraid of vitamin A, but no one's really measuring it, or so
You're
how are
absolutely
we?
right. We just don't measure it. Like, we'll order a lot of beta carotene or something. We just assume it's there.
And that's one of the biggest points I make in most of my presentations when I'm doing education is like, let's talk about what's the difference between nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics. Like, okay, well, if you're spotting, a patient that comes in to see you and they've got all the signs and symptoms of vitamin A deficiency, and you're like, well, you're eating enough, orange and red foods, so I think it's fine. And I go, well, what about that BCMO? Or is the liver compromised? Is the pancreas compromised? Is there some other underlying chronic condition? And it is the perfect example of using genomics, is going, we've assessed their, diet and their, like, let's say a 3-day food log or ongoing. And then we can maybe see that in their genetics that, like, hey, we're not converting that beta carotene to active A. We do need to support vitamin A because the acne is out of control. And, the hormones are just not being supported. So it's using our brains and our knowledge and then incorporating the genomics with that. It can help us better assess that if we're not going to run those labs.
So, but if someone's eating meat, like foods that have a face on them, as I say, they're going to get the active form of vitamin A. correct?
I mean, some of those foods have active vitamin A and some don't. Like organ meats are going to be
Yeah, they're the
higher
most
in active
dynamic.
A than some of the muscle meats. But I know my generation is like, what, liver? Like,
So
so
this is why we all need to move back to Europe, Sarah, because pate,
yeah,
pate. I mean, we've talked about this before, like native cultures around the world, but across the Caribbean and it's definitely more like Southern Europe. I mean, charcuterie is using up the piece of the animal that we usually throw out, right? And even though we laugh at pate, it's actually fabulous, you know.
so
So
good.
it's so good. I know.
Even
And I'm
just the
not
simple
talking the mushroom
liverwurst.
pate either. I'm talking like, you know, the real deal, real deal. So, yeah. We have charcuterie in our house. It's not here every day, but we do. Paul does not like pate. I love it. I mean, for some people, it's a texture thing, right? They just don't like that smooth texture. But, you know, my dad's French. So, I mean, we're born with pate. It's in our DNA.
We just need to bring some of that over here to the US. My goodness.
Yeah, but there are some great. I mean, I think one of the greatest food towns in America is Charleston, South Carolina, and I was there maybe about 20 years ago. But you know, there was one place I walked into. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I can't remember. It's called South of North or South of North Street. Something. It's a great restaurant, but they were doing their in-house charcuterie and pate. I'm like, finally. So go for
Yum.
pate, people. All right. So the common complaints we could say are things like stiffness, slow bounce back from workout, like fatigue, right? So we're going to get to that. Sleep disruption, changes in emotion. That's what I'm seeing. And you and I talked about, and I want to talk about migraines because you've made a note. They talk about they feeling like they're crazy, like manic, crazy. When I went through menopause, I never felt like that. I never felt mood swings. I felt low mood, and I've never felt that in my life. I'm like, what is this about? I felt colder. I didn't feel apathetic. I just felt a lower mood, and I just didn't realize what was going on. So I guess I was one of the lucky ones. But what I'm seeing increasingly, Sarah, is women literally are feeling like they're unhinged, and they're desperate to feel hinged, you know. And now I can see why. We'll get into it, but weight gain and loss, right? Weight loss resistance. You made a note to me, and I'm going to jump ahead a tiny bit here because then we're going to jump into hormones. But you made a note as you're seeing increased migraines too.
Definitely.
And what is that? What's all that about? The increased migraines?
I think the hormone changes that we're going to talk about with estrogen in particular and progesterone. I think those fluctuating is becoming more of an issue combined with, you know, poor stress resilience and trying to do too much. So it's coming at us from both sides where we've got our body is changing, our environment is adding a taxation on the body, and it's increasing, you know, breakdown really.
Yeah, exactly, and we're going to get into that. So that sort of parlays us into, well, let's talk about the elephant, non-elephant, the she elephant in the room, or well, that's estrogen. But let's talk about sex hormones and jump off with estrogen. And you talked about shifts. But I'm going to kind of go into a deep dive with you on estrogen why it's connecting to so many of these symptoms. But one of the things, if we look at the role of estrogen, it appeared there is a connection between migraines and estrogen, right? And you had made a note to me about that. What is that connection?
Just estrogen's role in helping to stabilize mast cells. And that's, I think I've mentioned this before, but like having a hysterectomy as a way to solve problems. And then all of a sudden we have an increase in histamine and, you know, might be more miserable than ever with some of that neuroinflammation. But declining estrogen could mean we've got less stable mast cells and therefore, you know, a little bit more migraine action or congestion and, you know, itchiness or hives or poor sleep and restlessness overall is just really a neuroinflammation impact downstream.
Yeah, and so the way that would show up in In migraines, see, one of the ways it shows up, and we'll go back to methylation, is you require methyl molecules. Methylation supports HNMT, so it's a gene that helps clear or metabolize histamine. And estrogen and histamine have a relationship. They move together, right? And I always wondered, and I didn't know this until more recently. I thought about this morning, Sarah. I wake up every day and there's some amazing pearl of science, and that's not what I learned today, but I'm always amazed at science. And I think relatively recently I got it in my head. Yeah, histamine and estrogen move together. I'm like, now why would that be? Why on earth would they do that? And it turns out that histamine is integral to securing the egg in the lining, the uterine lining. And I did not know that. Did you know
I don't
that?
think I don't think I did.
Look it up. Somebody said that. You didn't quite say that right, Amanda, but check it out because it didn't make sense. If you think the estrogen rises, and then right after ovulation, it kind of goes away, and then it peaks again right before menstruation. It's like, oh, that totally makes sense. So it's sort of setting up this environment to allow the egg to embed, I guess. And so it's protective in that regard. I thought that was amazing.
That's so cool.
It makes
The
sense.
Yeah, the body is so interesting, and there's a reason it does all the things that it does. And when those processes get disrupted, it really can throw a wrench in the whole thing. And I know I was thinking about hormone metabolism with elevated BPA levels. Like we've got microplastics like you wouldn't believe. And that I've definitely seen women in their 20s, women in their 60s who have elevated BPA levels. And when that happens, it mimics estrogen. And so they may have like an estrogen dominance, maybe insulin resistance, and their hormones are completely off, and they're experiencing a lot of that neuroinflammation. And
Which we
it
can
can
see.
also, yeah, it can also tumble into their neurotransmitters where now they've got, high glutamate. And so they are feeling that neuroexcitatory symptoms that really make it difficult to function day to day and need a ton of support just to get those systems back
Yeah,
online.
absolutely.
So yeah, the BPA and the plastics and even consuming, like canned beverages, while they're in an aluminum can, they're also lined with plastic. Canned goods and canned, beverages like sodas and Spindrift, which is something we enjoy, and it's like lower calorie, mostly juice and carbonated water, and those are great. But I also have to be like, hey, let's not consume too many of those. Not because I have a problem with Spindrift, but it also is lined with plastic. And so those are exposures that we're unintentionally having that will have an impact on our hormones down the line. So if we enjoy some of those packaged beverages, just be thinking about like, what's the toxic burden and load that could potentially have an impact on our hormones downstream.
No kidding. I was thinking as you were talking, like how toxic aluminum can be as well. Aluminum can stop or downregulate the Krebs cycle, the energy cycle. It's the clock that feeds into where we actually make energy, the metabolic or biochemical clock, and aluminum actually will, yeah, shut that down. So does aluminum leach at all in these cans? I have no idea. I
I don't
think
know either.
so.
It's a great question. Maybe the plastic lines it well enough that it's not
Sort of
even an
sequesters
issue.
it. Yeah.
But the aluminum also, when that's elevated, tends to increase other heavy metals. Like they sort of start to
Yeah.
congregate
Yeah.
because aluminum is present there. It's very challenging. And one thing that I was really troubled by is regular cyanocobalamin injections actually have an aluminum preservative in them. So if you read the label of, oh, I'm low in B12, I need a B12 injection, I highly recommend having it compounded, or you could consider methylated if that's something that you need for yourself. But a regular B12 injection for our elderly population, for example, who have declining B12 levels. And we know that that's true because stomach acid changes and absorption changes, is that those injections, if you're getting them every month, unfortunately also have a preservative in them, of aluminum, which just does not make any sense to me. We're like undoing the good that we might be doing with that.
Well, you also have to detoxify the is it the cyanide molecule, like that molecule as well, which is interesting that that's a carrier, whatever.
One of those good, better, best scenarios, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's like availability, versus, if we have access to a compounded or what's covered by insurance. I know when I was doing methyl B12 injections, it was like turning the lights on, changed my life alongside supporting, the Hashimoto's that I'd had for a number of years and just could not manage it, through supplementation and diet alone. And so adding thyroid medication, adding a methyl B12 injection, and it was like, wow, this is what it's like to function.
And I
Like
think like many women and maybe men too, because I think men get missed out. Their hormones change in midlife too. Really feel like you were talking about. Oh my gosh, I've forgotten what it feels like to function. So we're going to talk about why that's happening. But I have to tell you a funny story because you and I are both tea drinkers, and I grew up in England. This will make you burst out laughing, I know, even if you don't do it into the microphone. So I remember my father many years ago, we would, everyone gets up in England or did, and they will make a pot of tea. And of course it was tea bags, and it was not Lipton tea bags. We had better tea then. So imagine me coming to the States in the 80s, like, what is this for tea? And it would be like a Lipton tea bag that was used for lemon tea or whatever you make in the summer. I'm like, oh, I did never heard of that. So anyway, so my grandmother would come and stay at our house. And my father would be beside himself because she'd start making the tea. And there would be 3 tea bags for a pot of tea, right? So you fill up the tea. But then throughout the day, grandmother would drink tea throughout the day. She wouldn't empty the teapot. She'd just keep putting more tea bags in it. So in the end, like, my father's like, there's not going to be any room for the water in the teapot. She just keeps this pile of tea bags in there. And he said to her, he said, tea bags have aluminum in them. You're going to be a toxic with aluminum with the amount of teas. So you imagine, like, it was like this, like, excuse me, sinkhole of tea bags in a teapot. And sure enough, and the tea was so strong. Like, whenever I go see my parents,
probably
my
so bitter.
well, yeah, I guess I don't know. You just put milk in it, then it's not bitter. But it was just hilarious to think back on. And then I would go and see my mom and my stepfather in France. And of course, my mom being British, the tea would still be made the same way as it was in England. I'm like, oh my God, this is so strong. Like, British tea is really strong compared to what we drink here, right? Like, can you just like not steep the tea as long as this, Mom, please? I can't drink it. But anyway, the idea of this teapot that got heavier and heavier throughout the day because the amount of tea bags in there, like sacks of sugar beet or something, or sacks of oat. It was hilarious to think back about it. So anyway.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
Yeah, I know. But he's like, you're going to be toxic with aluminum. I'm like, where did that come from, Dad? But it's
Well,
probably
I
true.
haven't heard the aluminum piece in tea bags. Not that it's not true. I'm more aware of like microplastics
Yeah,
in tea bags
nowadays, yeah.
as one reason to utilize like a stainless steel, tea basket. That's what I use as
Yeah.
much as I can. Obviously, when you're traveling, you're limited and probably have to do that unless you bring some of your own, plastic-free tea bags or
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I've had I had a client who was making vats of tea every day, and it was really tanking his hormones, I think, because caffeine can really, decrease hormones, especially testosterone. And so that was something seeing in his genetics, like slow caffeine metabolism, drinking like a couple of gallons of
Oh
black
my
and green
gosh.
tea yeah, it was a lot. And
Wow.
I've never seen this before, but I was like, if your goal is to like have better testosterone so that you can increase muscle mass, like as you're aging, I hate to say it, but we've got to decrease your caffeine metabolism or caffeine intake. Because I think I was calculating something like maybe 1,000 milligrams of caffeine every
Oh
day based
my.
on how much, and like the upper limit the FDA recommends is like 400.
400. Yeah.
So, and then all of that caffeine impacting his hormones, but also he was using, Lipton tea bags and so many of them for that amount of tea that he was consuming every day. And I was like, I'm also pretty concerned about the microplastics that you're being exposed
Oh my
to
gosh.
every day from making that tea. And so, I know it's going to be more of a pain in the butt and more expensive, but try loose and just,
Yeah.
sift it out with a fine strainer. Cause I have like a quart, not a quart, like 2 quart liter size jar, and I have a stainless steel really long steeper. And so if I'm making a lot of tea, like for iced or hot or whatever, I'll put loose tea into this long
Yeah.
steeper inside this tall, like about liter size. And I also have like pump pots that are lined in glass,
Yes, what I have.
that I'll put that steeper directly into the pump pot if I'm taking it to church or something like
Hmm.
that to share, or if I'm making it for myself to drink throughout the day without having to remake it. It'll keep it hot just like you would a pot of coffee. But those exposures, they do add up
They
and they
do.
they will impact your hormones, unfortunately. So, and even the plastic over the cup steepers, I used those a lot in my 20s and 30s, not thinking about it because it was BPA free, right? But we've swapped BPA for BPS, and it's just as toxic. So anything that says BPA free, I'm sorry, it's not going to help you. It's kind of a marketing term
Wow.
and marketing phrase to try to sell something that's still made of a polymer and plastic, and those unfortunately stick around for quite some time.
Well, we never know, depending on how long the Straits of Hormuz are closed, Sarah. We may all be forced back to loose tea because we're not going to have the oil in the supply chain to make all these plastic things. Let's hope that one blows over. It just made me think, how everything does roll back to like petroleum and oil. And yeah, however,
Definitely.
however these molecules are made. I know. All right, so let's talk about estrogen then. Let's talk about or sex hormones and the I think it's the mother of all hormones is estrogen, and no wonder we think about it as we live longer. People feel like in midlife that they're losing their minds and they're losing their energy and they're putting on weight and things are falling apart. Well, when you kind of look at some of the central, if you look for a central hormone or the role of hormones, estrogen is like right in the middle of it all. And that's why I think it should be a human right for women who to be able to ask their care providers about looking into hormone replacement therapy and if it's right for them, because estrogen is so central to so many things. So let's talk about breakdown and recovery to start with what estrogen does, and testosterone also plays a role, but estrogen is bigger to me. So estrogen, and jump in here, Sarah, stimulates, we know it stimulates bone cells for a start. It helps modulate bone, making bones and break them down. So osteoblasts and osteoclastic activity, it's critical in that. You've heard me, we've talked about, how critical testosterone and estrogen were to my health journey. It was night and day. Within 2 years, I was able to accrete 25% of my bone mass through a lot of interventions. But when I lost HRT for 2.5 years, I lost bone. No matter what I
Mm.
did, it was just devastating to me. So huge fan. But it turns out that also estrogen stimulates fibroblasts, which are the cells responsible for making collagen and elastin as well. So, and this, I have to tell you, Sarah, I'm going to get into this, but this is what I see critically with women who are going into midlife when I'm able to look at some of the mania they feel. And I'm looking at an organic acid test, particularly what kept coming up for me. And I don't know if you've seen it, but you will now, because I'm going to tell you that what I keep seeing is high or very high turnover on these tests with midlife women are methylhistidine, hydroxyproline, and there's a couple of other markers that are telling me that their body is breaking down tissue or collagen to support energy somewhere else. And it is not
Mm.
necessarily because they're not eating enough protein. Chances are they may not be. And it doesn't mean you better go start taking collagen. What it is there is a metabolic imbalance that is causing them to break down that tissue. And it has blown me away. It's something I've seen over the last year. And I'm like, what is going on here? I'm like, oh, wait a minute here. So you connect that all of these women in my practice are losing estrogen. They're at that age and they may or may not be repleting it yet, or they're just starting to get into repletion, or asking for support or being measured. So think about it. As we lose estrogen, oh gosh, we think, oh my gosh, I need it. Now I need Botox or fillers or whatever. They are losing potentially those tissues. They're losing the impetus to make the molecules, if you will, that pump up our skin, that support the structure of our skin. But in organic acids, when they're under stress, this is a lab test that I look at. Not every practitioner does. There's a number of tests we can look at. We're looking at the molecular insights of you and what is going on in multiple systems. That blew me away because I couldn't figure it out. What is going on? What's going on? And now knowing that estrogen is integral to stimulating those tissues, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I don't have a ton of clients in midlife who, run organic acids per se. And it's mostly not covered by insurance. So they have insurance and want to do as much as they can in lab tests that are
100%.
covered by insurance. So I haven't seen that. And that's a very new and very interesting
It's
insight, especially because we're trying to make sure our skincare routine is on point. And so,
And if
like,
if you're not taking care of the inside or the signaling, because estrogen is a signaling molecule, right? So the only reason I was running organic acids is because a lot of my clientele, they're midlife, and they're not coming in, oh, because my skin's sagging. They're coming in because they feel manic. They can't sleep. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum. This is where it gets to be so interesting. We just connect the dots here. So we know that estrogen and testosterone, when our levels start to bounce around, and our minds or our bodies, our brains have always been pretty much used to a steady monthly rhythm, especially if we're talking about women. Not all women have had that luck, right? We see that with younger girls really struggling with their menstrual cycle or whatever, endometriosis, PCOS, so the hormones are bouncing around. But assuming you've managed to get through that to midlife, all of a sudden what the brain is used to in terms of signals is changing. It's like, wait, one day you're on, one day you're off. That's probably something you're experiencing. And the brain perceives that as a stressor, right? So what does the brain do when it's stressed? It says, hey, cortisol, something's up. It's going to trigger cortisol, right? And cortisol is to say, do something, like something's wrong, right? It's amazing to see this. And so, of course, when it says something's wrong, the immune system's like, wait, something's wrong. Hence, like, why am I suddenly allergic to food? Why am I breaking out in hives? Like, why do I suddenly get migraines? Like, the immune system's like, something's wrong. Like, let's do something. Like, let's release some histamine to take care of whatever's wrong, right? I'm kind of dashing through a bunch of science. But the other thing that shows up is cortisol is also going to send a stress signal. And guess what it's going to do? It's going to tap dopamine and say, hey, like the dopamine pathway, say, release your fight or flight hormones, right? Release some epinephrine, and get out there and take care of whatever's wrong. And when we do that, depending on, and we're going to go to the serotonin side, when we do that, depending on what your SNPs look like, that's an absolute disaster, right? You hit dopamine, and suddenly your body's like, wait, what? And then you're flooded with dopamine, and if you can't break that down, guess what? You show up manic. I'm just jumping through a few ideas here, but elevated levels of dopamine, particularly for adults versus kids, because kids can't off gas it either, will show up as argumentative, moody, insomnia, changes in sleep, people, but low fuse.
Aggression.
Yeah,
Yeah, aggression.
aggression, and that's what we see in kids, like aggression. As adults, we know we can like go out for a run, or like maybe we can do something, which often can make it worse. But with kids, they can't, right? Or they can be aggressive, but they don't know how to off gas this. So all of this is like, oh, thanks, estrogen and testosterone. So we really appreciate you not being in balance all our lives. So now we have this. But what I'm seeing, Sarah, which I find devastating, is not so much the dopamine side. Where it's showing up with the women I'm seeing, more on dopamine, less on dopamine, is more on serotonin. That, of course, estrogen initiates tryptophan hydroxylase. It sends that signal to the first major enzyme in the pathway through which we make serotonin and melatonin. So if the ignition switch is one day, it's like, let's just douse this, and the next day, it's like you can't even light it, strike a match. The impact on serotonin levels is one day you're on, one day you're off. And depending on your SNPs, this is where genetics is so useful. Some people perceive the changes in signals as being so loud and so chaotic that they just want to crawl into their bed. And that's what I'm starting to see. And of course, like, we'll go and see the doctor, maybe say, I just don't even know what's wrong with me. And I kind of went through that, like a low mood, but I never went, because I don't have the SNPs that make the world chaotic. But can you imagine, you've kind of gone along and you've just survived to midlife. Then you have a different serotonin signal that suddenly it's really loud. And then, oh, well, you need a serotonin reuptake inhibitor because you're not looking at genetics. Here, we'll just plug this in. You just need a more consistent serotonin signal. These women orbit because you suddenly turned out the hearing aid to so loud. It's like walking into a bar or, an airport, a really loud public space. And I don't know if Zeke is really sensitive to that, like really loud spaces. And I see this in my clients. They got to go hide. Get me out of here. It is overwhelming.
Wesley is actually more sensitive
Wesley's
to
more
loud.
sensitive, yeah. And
With his
it's
ADHD, and yeah, he's way sensitive to the sounds.
so when I see that in genetics and I'm looking, I'm like, okay, we are not going to guess here. We're going to actually see what your body is doing. Is it making serotonin, or is it actually shuttling it over to the immune system, the kynurenine pathway? And that's why I say it's almost, I'm at the place now, say, I'm going to run your genetics, but I'm going to run a test at the same time. I have to see you molecularly, because if we guess wrong, you will never come back and see me. You say, you took something and you made my sleep so much more. I'm not prescribing medication, but we're trying to manipulate these pathways to get some calm. And this is where going back upstream and saying, listen, how can we optimize the signals from the sex hormones to start with so that the body doesn't perceive it as a stress, which is where cortisol, this is what we see. We look at tests that allow us to see cortisol. The output of cortisol can be through the roof as the body is reacting to these hormones bouncing around. So, and then it goes on. So we see estrogen is like it's key to like facilitating this communication in the brain, and it has a devastating effect throughout the body. So we've seen how it's critical to the connective tissue, right, and healing. We see the mood piece and the sleep piece are absolutely connected to these neurotransmitters. But here's the other thing that now is like the pièce de la résistance. It's like, I don't even know how to say it in English, but this is the linchpin, right? That must be how we translate the French. The pièce de la résistance reminds me of something else I want to bring up that was so funny to watch on Netflix. We'll get to it. That makes me laugh about my heritage. But what cortisol, no, let me go to estrogen. So cortisol, if we look at energy, what do people complain of? Like fatigue, right? Like they're just like, I don't feel the same way. Or like you say, workout, resistance to workout or exercise. What is it? What is the term there when you can't work out? Exercise.
Poor recovery.
Poor
It's
recovery.
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
And people say like they're dragging. And then they go like, well, I just need to exercise some more. Like obviously something wrong. So
I'm just out of shape. That's
I'm
all.
just out of shape. I've got to do Orange Theory. No, please don't do that. Like meditation may be better, or just changing the form of exercise, getting the pressure out of your system. So cortisol, of course, is just going to ignite this oxidative stress response. And that one of the major things that blocks the Krebs cycle, let's discuss what the Krebs cycle is in a moment, is oxidative stress. It will actually put the hammer down or put a cork in the bottle of the pathway that allows you to produce energy. It's amazing.
And there's so many things that can disrupt the Krebs cycle, including toxic exposures.
Yeah.
So the aluminum or the heavy metals and the BPA, and that then disrupts energy production as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what's the Krebs cycle do? It's like this entry point in your body. It's like, what do we do with the carbs and, all the metabolites from carbs and fat and protein? Well, they kind of spin them through this cycle. It's like going onto a constant like traffic circle. Like we just spin onto this and you get off at 11 o'clock and go to Indianapolis or whatever.
A spinning conveyor belt, if you will.
Yeah,
That
and at the end
like
of the
here we're doing this, and then here something's coming. It's like the on ramp and off ramp with nutrients in, nutrients out, and then it keeps spinning, and they pick up what they need, and then they carry it to the next section, and then
which is the electron transport chain, which is you go through 4 mini roundabouts, at the end of which you produce ATP. So, so it turns out that estrogen is so integral to not necessarily the Krebs cycle itself, but it actually is integral to those last like little roundabouts in the electron transport chain. It activates the last complex, stimulates the very last complex before you make ATP. So think about that. You're driving up, gates closed, can't merge onto the roundabout. The traffic's backed up, and I think it also impacts complexes 1 and 3. So this was one of these like amazing ahas, like probably Stacey Seslowski taught us 10 years ago. We forgot our friend Stacey. But it's cool. It stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the production of the mitochondria to start with. Testosterone does too. But imagine so here we're losing this little whisper, hey, you need to spin. The roundabout or the traffic circle needs to work, and you lose that. And then progesterone, this is blew me away. Stimulate. So you get on the traffic cycle. Here's our Krebs cycle, and at 1 o'clock is the first molecule. It's called citrate. Progesterone activates citrate. So what else do we lose? Testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen. So when you lose this stimulation, and this is what I wanted to tell you, what I'm now seeing is, so we feel people, estrogen, testosterone, integral, particularly estrogen, to these to our neurotransmitters. We don't have a clear signal to the brain, so cortisol is through the roof. Cortisol will actually block the Krebs cycle. We're losing progesterone itself, which stimulates the first step in the Krebs cycle. And what is the number one thing that women particularly complain of as they go into menopause? Weight gain. The body composition is changing, the fat's going in different places. But when the Krebs cycle is backed up, it actually, it's not that it reverses, it just doesn't work as efficiently. The overflow becomes fatty acids. It just is what it does. You push citrate plus, is it malonyl-CoA makes something like that, it's acetyl-CoA. That reaction creates fatty acids, and then fatty acids are packaged together in triglycerides, and with a healthy dose of insulin, that gets deposited as fat. So these hormones are designed to work in this forward motion, but when they're ineffective or inefficient or inconsistent, it affects your brain, it affects your sleep, it affects your immune system, and it affects literally how your body makes energy. And I tell you, when I measure all this in an organic acid test, or you can do a Nutrival or whatever, almost always the first 4 steps of the Krebs cycle are high, which means inefficient. It doesn't mean say, oh, they're over-supplemented. It means they can't budge. And so you have this roadblock. And often, if you run a Dutch test, the biotin is high, which means it's inefficient. You can't pass go into the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle without biotin. So it is Genetics, always your story, right? The patient's story. Genetics gives us an example where the imbalances might be. The labs test, validate, and boom. It is amazing. And that's why I'm like, this should be a human right. That women and men can be taken seriously, that when they say, I am falling apart, they are, like structurally, energetically, from an immune perspective, and it goes back, like so much of it, but not all of it, goes back to these sex hormones. So isn't that
Yeah, I mean,
amazing?
that's incredible. I just learned a lot. So, I mean, if anyone thought that I had any contribution to this episode, they were
Yeah.
sorely mistaken. No, like this is your area. And like I hope that after just that monologue that people really appreciate the masterclass that was. Like that your brain is so good in this space. Like I just love to hear about the connections that you've seen, for yourself, for your clients. And then you're going, okay, if I'm seeing it in myself, I'm seeing it in my clients. What's the connection in the biochemistry? You go back to, what's happening in the Krebs cycle. How is this connected? Because otherwise we can't get from A to B to C. And if we don't
Exactly.
understand those connections, we can't fix it, right?
Exactly.
You're lifting the hood, you're the biochemistry mechanic, right? You're trying to figure out why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense. And hormones having such a huge role and then changing, I tell my husband this all the time, like it feels so unfair that we start a menses in our preteen teen years, and then we try to manage it throughout our lives for 30, 40 years, what have you. And then it changes again. And it's like,
Hmm.
it's something to manage that is so difficult just to like have a pregnancy, have a consistent, cycle. What does the cycle mean? What do all of our symptoms around, the hormone cycle, what do those mean? And then they're just gone. Like
Yeah,
it feels
no.
incredibly unfair to even remove that piece. Like, to be honest, I'd rather have a period for my entire life than deal with this. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how our mothers did not complain more about, peri and menopause, and maybe they're just way tougher than I am, but like, wow, I just had no idea that this would be as challenging as it would
Yeah,
be.
and remember that our genes are gatekeepers. Like your genes and mine are completely different in how we handle the impact of these sex hormones anyway. So some of us, we just fly through it. I have very little color in my DNA. Thanks, mom and dad. Thank you. I mean, there's stuff, but the neurotransmitter and detoxification are not issues for me. Methylation more so. So, I think this is why it's DNA is our roadmap, and it helps us know how to drive up to that toll booth, and what's going to be what's on the other side of that. So. But what I'll say to you listening, whether you're a clinician or just member of the public, that when you kind of drive up to the toll booth and you're stepping in, like, okay, I'm going to go through midlife, some of you will fly through it. But if you're working with a clinician like Sarah and myself, or someone's trained in functional nutrition and medicine and this field, it's work. Okay. I will tell you, when I'm working with women with this, it's like, first of all, we're going to titrate one or two things at a time. So you have to take a deep breath and keep really good, records, because we are going to accentuate maybe thiamine, like a B vitamin, and biotin. Okay. Did that work? Good. Next, next, next. The idea that you think, or you're given, as I say, a wheelbarrow full of supplements, your body cannot deal with that. It can't, right? Okay, we're going to deal with the anxiety. Good. That maybe takes 6 to 8 weeks, all right? And then we'll try and work with the sleep. And then we're going to work with the weight loss resistance. Like the weight thing, that's 4 months from now until we can get the stress part components sorted out in your body, which may mean we deal with hormones first. You know what I mean? It's like, where are the bottlenecks? And this is what I've seen that has just been absolutely mind blowing. But the other thing, Sarah, I think that's important is there's the option like, okay, can you naturally support progesterone and estrogen? Absolutely. For some people it really works and that's the way they want to go. But if you're just suddenly given progesterone, that's one of the first things that women are given. It's the first thing you lose, like vitamin, sleep. And 20% of women, I don't know if you started on that journey or not, Sarah, but 20% of women are absolutely miserable because guess what? Progesterone also has its own roadblocks. Its goal is to be transformed into aloe-P. That's actually the end of the run. That's what's the end at the top of the ladder or the end of the ladder. That is what binds with GABA, that to get GABA, which is the soothing, molecule, the calming molecule. So 20% of women are going to be miserable because there are two enzymes that are involved in that transformation. And if they don't work, your progesterone, guess what? It's sky high. And guess what it makes? Cortisol. No, it doesn't make it. It transforms sideways. It's trying to get to testosterone. And these women will absolutely orbit. And they're absolutely
Yeah.
miserable. So
Well, I found that to be true for me for sure. My progesterone was low and it contributed to, infertility with my pregnancies. And really, progesterone saved my pregnancy with Wesley. But then trying to postpartum, like get my progesterone online, I tried and it made me wired. I was like, I was
oh, there you
wired.
go. Yeah.
I was not restful, I was not calm, but it's also this season of life where I can't get more sleep. I can't just magically get more sleep with two small kids
No,
at home.
no.
So the lifestyle piece that needs to pair with, just taking hormone replacement therapy,
100%.
it just is not possible, during that time. And so there's definitely intolerances for some hormone replacement therapy for some women. And managing cortisol or even your thyroid, like when we're talking about thyroid hormones, you've got T4, which under stressful conditions turns into reverse T3. And we've got an excess of cortisol, and then we don't have it turning into T3 that we need with the active,
That's
thyroid
so
hormone. So
true.
it's like being on the gas and the brake at the same time.
And of
And
course,
so,
then metabolically, that situation, then losing testosterone, both of those are master stimulators of metabolism,
yeah.
right? So, wow.
So I really struggle too with the management of some thyroid conditions where we're only taking Synthroid, we're only taking T4, but are these women stressed? Because if you're only giving them T4 and it's really largely converting to reverse T3, is that really helping them to get
That's a great
into a
point.
better place versus, at one point, and mine are compounded, but I would take my thyroid hormone on an empty stomach first thing in the morning and I would have anxiety for 2 hours and I couldn't function. But my thyroid, levels are like within the normal range. My antibodies are still really pretty low. And so we just switched to T3 only to coast on the gas for a while. And I've been doing that for, I don't know, 6 months to a year. And the anxiety is gone. And we're going to see how this goes. But
That's
we just have
amazing.
to think about, what's happening with with these mechanisms because they don't exist in a vacuum. We
No, they
can't just
don't.
give progesterone or estrogen and solve a problem. We have to shape the lifestyle around all of those things at the same time. And I have, autoimmune stuff and
Hmm.
chronic infection stuff that has a role in how my body is going to metabolize these things. And so we have to see them as an N of one, as a whole person with their genetics, their conditions, their lifestyle factors, and their stress management and all of that. So many pieces.
What did you associate the anxiety with when you were just given T4? Like just your body's inability to like,
I had both T4 and T3. It
okay.
was just that at one point I was like, I can't function and take this in the morning. Like, so I would just stop taking it. And I don't recommend that. Don't do that. It's just like I was stuck. And so seeing a different practitioner who works in the hormone space to treat it differently, even than a functional medicine practitioner would. So It's we do have to sometimes trial and error things, but I'm
Yeah.
like, I have no reason to be anxious right now. It's not like it was situational and I had a deadline or a,
Mm.
talk coming up. It was just I would take my my thyroid meds and be like, and now I'm anxious. Like that's
So
not
interesting,
clearly
isn't it?
your body is telling you that this is not working for you. So
I like the way.
but I mean,
Go ahead.
methyl B complexes can do that to people too and
Oh,
send them sky
yeah.
high when their detox pathways are gummed up and you're like adding methyls to, is like putting fuel on the fire with some of these bodies. We can't force something that's just not ready.
No, that probably the most overprescribed supplement is a B complex. I just go hide in the cupboard. Just like, you're taking what? Okay, why do you add up the sheer amount of Bs that you're taking and figure out which one you don't want to take? Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's interesting. Gosh, there was something I was going to say to you. Went right out of. I think we covered the
You're talking
anxiety.
about hormones and anxiety, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. The thyroid, but no, I knew what it was. It's like the number one thing that I find myself saying to my clients or asking is like, what are you doing that's restorative? What are you doing to balance your nervous system? Because yes, the neurotransmitters and the hormones are creating all this chaos, but you actually can. This is what Chinese medicine is so brilliant. All the the tai chi, the woo woo stuff, like what is this in yoga, what have you. This is actually where it works, and the vagus nerve work. This is what it does. It takes the fuel out of the system, right? It helps with the restoration because if you don't find that parity, if you don't discover your chi, right? If you don't figure out that balance, doesn't matter what we do with hormones and supplements and all the right things and, being out in nature and all the stuff, which is important. I think that's been the most important thing I'm seeing. As we know, you and I talk about it a lot, we experience it a lot, but what you want to talk about that with your own life and your own work, how important these restorative practices are.
Yeah, they just have to be part of our daily approach. And I know I find that super challenging being a mom of
A hundred
kids
percent.
that are
We go
high.
into a million miles an hour as soon as they
Yeah,
wake up.
my kids are 12 and almost 10. They're not even young anymore, but in some ways because they're so smart and so insightful and so curious and I love that about them, but they come home and it's like Greg has just asked me a question and then Zeke's talking to me and Wesley's talking and I'm like it's coming at me
Yeah,
like all at the same time and I'm like guys, like wow, it's the overstimulation of me and I'm like this, introvert. I love the quiet, I love the calm and I just don't have that in my world
yeah,
when my kids are home, which is why as much as I would love to homeschool them, I just don't know that I could. My margin for that is not great, but yeah, it's recognizing how to manage and juggle all of those things and taking care of yourself with your various therapies that are non-negotiables, and keeping them part of your routine and trying to put them first.
yes,
So, for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I can schedule my day as I like. So having slow mornings and not setting an alarm for me is actually one of the most helpful things ever. So, my cousin Elizabeth helps with nannying our boys and getting them up in the morning because literally if I go downstairs when they're eating breakfast,
yeah,
getting ready for school, it happened this morning. Elizabeth's reading to them. They're eating their breakfast so that they can focus. Otherwise they're bouncing all over the place. I walked down to like go get ready for my consultation this morning and Wesley goes, "Hey mom." And I'm like,
that's
nope,
it.
because it
Yeah,
it just it disrupts their morning. It takes everything longer. They're thinking about things after school, not what's happening right now in the
yeah,
morning. And
yeah,
so Elizabeth's taking mornings and she loves them and she's so gifted and patient, but
yes,
she doesn't know the answer to the questions of what happens after school.
right.
Mom does. And so I've just largely had to take myself out of mornings with them on school days, not setting an alarm and just letting my body wake up because an alarm for me is cortisol inducing. Even though there's no real reason to feel that way, it's just like okay, now my day's starting. What do I got to
Yeah,
get
the,
done?
the
And
gate,
then my brain
the
starts
door's
going.
already open and the dog's escaped already. Yeah,
Yes. So that's just how I've had to like manage my stress responses for things is if I can avoid going downstairs and seeing my kids before school at all, I will.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't want to see them. It's just I don't want their thoughts to go there. I don't want it to derail the morning. I don't want them to miss out on, time with Elizabeth, finishing their breakfast, and accomplishing everything too be at school and to be ready to learn when moms come down and then,
That's interesting.
501 questions,
Oh, yeah.
start coming.
I know
And
if there
so,
is kids, it's like you better be ready.
yep. Wait till after school. I will answer the questions, and usually I hear them come in the door. They come up, they open my office
Yeah.
door, and they've got
Boom.
all the Mom, okay, what? I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like
Yeah, no,
you're the
it's like
best.
somebody throwing
This
a
is
bucket
tough.
of water over your head and you're like swimming
Yep.
upstream. Yeah. No, it is.
So
And I think it is hard for moms and parents or whatever, but I look at some of the countries around the world, like I think in Spain, Spain and how important religion is, like the church and I really came to appreciate that, but not, okay, it's a church and religion. It is a way of life. It is the first thing you do. And when we had an exchange student from Spain, I mean, the first thing she wanted to know, well, she would always have her quiet time and her prayer time, but where could she connect, for which we were able to. And that was just part of her restoration. When I think about it, it was part of her faith and what she believed in, but it also was restorative to her day. It was her rhythm. And I thought it was
yeah.
really, really cool to see that. I mean, it was her priority, like land. Okay, where's my priest? And it wasn't like she couldn't live without, but it was just that
Yeah,
was
staying
how she
grounded in your
stays
faith and
grounded. And you see
mhm.
that, across Greece. I mean, this is what people do. They will actually go to church before they start their day, and that's their meditation. And I thought
Yeah.
it was just absolutely beautiful to see. And I know, like, Paul and I will switch off who's walking Abby, but, the dog, she's out for an hour in the morning. But whether I'm walking her first or I'm doing exercise first, those two both switch. Like, nothing keeps me out of my gym that I have one in my house, small. Nothing keeps me out of that work and doing that restorative work and then, being out in the sunshine in nature. It's just not negotiable. And I think, like you said, hey, do you ever get overwhelmed? Well, no, because my day starts like that. But I'm not a mom, I'm not dealing with that. So I appreciate the fact you've like wedged yourself before the kids, like, because that's the only time you can be you, because at the end of the day, you're an entrepreneur like me. We're spent, right? It's not like we can go to
Yeah.
sleep. Yeah, we can read a book, but it's not like, okay, I'm going to do like an hour yoga practice before I go to bed. Are you kidding? Maybe you can. That's not my day.
Yeah, we got to piece these things together to support our hormones because the reality is if we're running on cortisol, our hormones are tanked and stress resiliency tanks along with it.
Yeah.
So, and our ladies that we work with, we see that every day and sometimes they have the ability to change some of these lifestyle factors and sometimes some of those things are out of their control like
Correct.
caring for children who have a lot of needs or have a lot of like sports they're involved in and they're driving all over the place and they're thinking about a million things and feeling like they have ADHD and it's totally fair.
There's we need to move on. And we've been chit chatting here, so we knew we couldn't do it in an hour today. But there's a great gal on YouTube, and she's a mom of 3 kids. It's called Nourish, Move, Love, and she's great because she keeps the workouts to like it might be 10 minutes, 15, 20. Occasionally, it's 30 minutes because her audience are moms and dads.
Yeah, that's actually Lindsay Baumgren.
Yes.
I've met her. Yeah, her husband's a professional beach volleyball player,
I
so
did
I know who
not
she
know
is.
that. Oh my God. Well, that's why she
Yeah,
looks like a beach volleyball player too.
yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I know who exactly Lindsay
She's
Baumgren.
so
So shout out to
cool.
her. Yeah, she's got great workouts, great content, and all of it's free 'cause she does a lot of sponsorships and everything. So
Yeah.
for women who want workouts and even like prenatal workouts, she's got so
Yeah.
much free, great content with her team. So
She really is great, and I love her because she is a mom, and she relates to you as through the season of life. This is my season of life. And then sometimes she works out with a guy, I can't remember her name, but she's great. And they'll talk about, look, they say, I've met moms who use the kids as the dumbbell, the baby, like, 10
Yep.
pound baby. Say, you can do a goblet squat with a baby, but it's neat, that, I mean, her dopamine is like through the roof. I can't even imagine every time I'm listening to her, like, yeah, your dinner tables have got to be pretty amazing in your health, but she's cool in that she,
Is. She does a lot of great videos on like how she's meal prepping for the week for her
yes,
family and like she's like, okay, I've got this in the slow cooker. My kids love this. I prep, all of their, fruit for a couple of days and I
yeah.
prep this and I prep that. So she's really organized in that way and it works really well for their family dynamic.
Yeah, no, it's cool. So there you go. We know you know her personally, and I actually follow her. Like, especially if I want to do a weight workout, I mean, she packs it in there. She makes
She
me move. I
does.
mean, it's like, oh,
You will be sweating, you
you,
will be sore, you will pause and go,
woo, but it's 15
"Ooh."
minutes. One and you're
Yep.
done. And that's how she just keep going. So I do use her a lot. So anyway, we got a couple more things to look at. We kind of patterns we recognize. We've sort of woven that in and out, right? We've mentioned, but if there are any genes, it's just like a couple of three genes. I've got one set of genes that this is a pattern I see. I'm like, yeah, I kind of know there's a collision course here. Anything you're seeing?
I really tie it back to methylation, and I know I've said that a lot in this episode, but just the stress resiliency and the things tanking. Methylation just is the foundation. It's the base of the entire Jenga puzzle. And so if that isn't supported, a lot of those other pathways and needs are going to topple over. So I might see like COMT is dysregulated and it's fast and it's slow and we don't know which way is up. And
Yeah.
we've got MTR, MTRR, MTHFR, PEMT, and then downstream of that, sometimes the histamine and
It's
neuroinflammation
all
kind of gets
attached to
impacted,
it.
just as we talked about. So some of that's really kind of a review from what we've been talking about today. But after all that, the tissue can just break down from there. So and inflammation too, like if we're again trying to overexercise and under fuel. And I was just doing a teen education yesterday on like special topics in sports performance where we talk about relative energy deficiency in sport. Sometimes I think about that, for women in midlife, is that we've got relative energy deficiency in midlife. We call it REDS for, sports performance, but it's like red M, relative energy deficiency in midlife, where the needs are not being met nutritionally in order to see all of these systems, stay in place. And we start to see symptoms of energy
Yeah.
deficiency, whether we're under eating any one of our macro or micronutrients. So maybe that's a new thing that we're going to coin is relative energy deficiency in midlife.
Well,
But
yeah, and now you know why, because the hormones are directly impacting that gateway into the Krebs cycle. It was such a huge aha for me to see that. So I don't think you're imagining, we're not imagining it. It's true. And they could
high
be,
demand.
yeah, yeah. And then they step up the energy demand and they're even more depleted. So it's almost
And
like
then we've got injury.
and then injury.
Yeah.
Exactly. So basic, you like the match. And if somebody has inefficiencies in their collagen or tissue synthesis genes, if you will, the classic, the MMPs, the COL1A1, the GDF5, then you have like ready to utilize, ready to go genes like IL-6, TNF alpha. Boom, that person's midlife and recovery experience is going to be very different from somebody who doesn't, right? I mean, bottom line, I was going to get into sports, but I'm not. We'll talk about that some other time. But yeah, so I agree. So to me, the patterns are never about, oh, I don't detoxify estrogen. It's never there for me. My methylation's involved there. It's usually with certainly the neurotransmitter. The patterns there are going to accentuate how you pass through midlife, what's on, what's off, for sure. But what is really key to me too now is now looking at everything ends up in the mitochondria, everything, otherwise we're not alive. Depending on how you activate beta oxidation, depending on how you ordinarily ignite energy production or fat burning process, it can be further accentuated in midlife. So genes for the geeks out there, like PPAR gamma, C1 alpha. This is the master ignition switch, the universal energy ignition switch. If that is already dysregulated and the genes it then targets, it's a slow cascade. And so it accentuates that weight loss resistance potentially in midlife, even if you're doing all the right things. Okay, it just is, that's how we see it in genetics, but that's not the first thing we go after. It's like, oh well, let's just ignite that. Let's strike a match, and we're going to take omega-3s and optimize that pathway, get the stress out of the system first. Like, how can we do that? And that's the restorative piece. Like, you've got to get your foot off the gas pedal if you can. Like Sarah gave examples in your household. Cannot tell you how important it is. If breath work isn't for you and meditation isn't for you, that's why I recommend Qigong. It's a moving meditation. It's not woo-woo. And the number one thing you feel is, I did it this morning, Sarah, and I know you do it too. It's like you actually can take 5 minutes, and one of the prompts is, can you feel your chi, that tingling in your hands, or that like you can feel energy moving. I'm like, okay, then you're grounded to you. Now go out and do your day. You cannot take a supplement that down regulates your mitochondria. We could take all kinds of things like to stimulate it, but once you've absorbed those and utilized them, unless you change the system, you just constantly having to put gas in the tank. It's right.
Yeah, and some of your favorite accounts on YouTube for Qigong, for anyone listening, was like what, Nick Lawfrey, right?
Oh, Nick Lawfrey, yeah.
And then Lu Chen,
Lu
right?
Chen, she's great. Very different, very different. And oh my gosh, I've forgotten his name, who actually taught Nick Lawfrey. He was very approachable. Oh, I've forgotten because I've been listening to him for a while. And there's another one. She may be more woo for some of you, but Zen Body Flow, I absolutely love her. Beautiful. She's just a beautiful human being. Has some very beautiful, like, seasonal flows. I wouldn't start with her. She's my favorite. But Nick Lawfrey is very down to earth. He's not going to introduce weird terms, and if he does, it's like, this is how this works. This is how it shows up. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've always enjoyed like Yoga with Adrienne as well.
Yeah, she's
Really
great.
good too.
Love
Very
her. Does she have the dog?
she's
Does she have the dog?
yes, she
Yeah,
does.
Yoga with
Yeah,
Adrienne.
yeah.
Love her.
Yeah.
Um,
She's a calming presence in our
Very.
chaotic world.
There's another very easy kind of gateway yoga to, other than our own Shannon, Lemontier in her series, is Cassandra Yoga. So that's spelled with a K, Cassandra. She's Canadian. Beautiful, like 10-15 minute flow, very easy, very approachable. Even though she does advanced yoga, the majority of her programs are 10-15 minutes, and like very beginner friendly. She's just very, very approachable. So yeah, but I do love Yoga with Adrienne. She's awesome as well.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned like respecting those recovery rhythms, knowing what we need in order to thrive, sharing that with your partner, like this is what I need, and making sure you guys are on the same page. But James Vanderbeek, who unfortunately passed away about a month ago, and dad, parent to 6 kids, and it was really hard to see that decline. But his reflections, if you haven't followed him on like Instagram, are really beautiful. The things that he's taken away from this journey with cancer. But in January, he was sharing about, like New Year's resolutions and how maybe inappropriate it is to be doing new things during the winter when we should be resting and recovering, that animals are hibernating, and the plants, the leaves have fallen off. They're trying to store up their energy so that they're ready to sprout and grow, back
Great
bigger and
point.
stronger. And so I just loved his perspective that we need to stop fighting nature and to wait, to have those resolutions in the spring when we've recovered that energy and we're starting to get more sun exposure and more vitamin D, and taking the winter to recover and rest. And so I just think he's so wise, and
Yeah.
you can feel the peace coming off of him in those things. And even his reflection around his birthday a year ago with cancer is just like he had peace, this whole time. And he was never like sure of whatever the outcome was going to be, but he really appreciated the lesson and whatever it was that that he was gaining through this whole process. So I hope at the very least people will take seriously those lessons and incorporate them, because cancer comes out of like doing too much and busy bodies. And even our healthy, most fit clients can develop cancer as well from inflammation and chronic inflammation too. And so it's not just a diagnosis for the sick. It can be a diagnosis for the overachievers too.
Yeah, and that comes right back to the mitochondria too. That inflammation actually will basically create a reverse flux, and when we see certain markers, that's the metabolism. That's the theory of the metabolism of cancer. So 100%. I love what you just said there. It kind of rung a few bells for me, but yeah, there was somebody else who, when you were talking about him, oh yeah, when he's talking about, I totally agree, and I never thought about it. Why are we trying to do something renewing when nature is hibernating? And if you think about like Ayurvedic principles or Chinese medicine principles, I mean, right now is spring, is burgeoning. This is the time that we start to eat the fresh shoots, the bitter foods. This is the cleansing time as we grow, right? And so it would make sense right now to do your resolutions starting in March if you're in the northern
Yeah.
hemisphere, right? It's
The
totally.
green spring onions are now sticking above any little blades of grass right now. They're calling to you,
They
eat
are.
me.
Eat me and all the bitter greens and the ramps. And it makes me think of so whole living nutritionist. A shout out to Shannon Lamantier, who I partner with in the international space, and Sarah knows very well because I work with her, and we all buddies and all the things. Shannon she has a lovely membership program for yoga. It's very inexpensive, like $18 a month. But also she has something called Reset. And I think usually she does it twice a year. And she brings in these lovely principles, like Ayurvedic principles, and it's really wonderful. You learn so much about yourself, your doshas, if that's of interest, but like how she lives her life moving with the seasons. Like this is what we do in these 3 months and these 3 months, and it's really cool to learn that. I've so respectful of that. So it goes back to the fellow you mentioned. I'm going to bear that in mind, and maybe we should podcast on that in December. Say, okay, people, let's look at principles from around the world that are not associated with Western ideals of, look, it's a new year, let's start out. Like the
Yeah, let's
Chinese
get it
start in a
done.
different place than we do. So how can we decide January 1 is like when we do these things? So
We're all tired from all the holidays, and we're just like, but then the gym is packed and you're like, get out of my gym, wait a month. And you're like,
start in
when people start
February.
to fall off and they realize January wasn't the right time to start going to the gym, when we're all just trying to recover and rest with all the darkness that's going
Yeah,
on.
true. Well, that was jam-packed, Sarah. So I think we kind of, we covered our four areas. What are we seeing? What are the patterns? How do we guide? I think we kind of wove it throughout all of that. Do you have anything else you want to add? Like things we didn't touch on? Or you think we...
I think some of your closing thoughts that you had, that midlife does not eliminate resilience, but it reduces the margin for ignoring recovery signals, and how perfect with everything we just talked about. Like, don't ignore your body, don't ignore the seasons, and how you're built, and the things that you need to thrive. So we want to be aware of those things, that maybe we just can't get away with it anymore. And if we keep sort of forcing something to make a square peg fit into a round hole, or, we just, the American way of, if we just blast our way through it, it'll
It'll
work.
be fine.
It'll be fine. And that's just not really how our biochemistry works. We need something gentle, and to take those recovery days seriously. So take good care of our bodies.
Oh, what a great conversation. I think...
Yeah. As I mentioned, this was a total masterclass in your area. And I love that you've started picking up on the organic acids piece. I haven't gotten to experiment in that department yet with the midlifers, mostly with kiddos, just because it's better than doing blood work.
Oh, yeah.
But it sounds really fascinating, and I'll definitely consider ways I can incorporate that with some of my midlifers. So thanks
Yeah.
for that recommendation.
No, you're welcome.
And we will see you guys next month.
We
So
will.
thanks so much. Yeah.
Thanks for
Hope you
listening.
enjoyed our little chat. Bye.
Bye, everyone.